And we're really back to the same, what we've been doing before. We're just continuing to retopo this, right? That's kind of where we're at. Um, Now, sometimes you have to puzzle pieces together, right? That's one of the drawbacks to retopologizing. It takes a little bit of time. But like I said, when you get to weird shapes and weird forms, it's to figure it out. Box modeling and spinning edges can also take a good amount of time. So it's kind of one of those things. There's really no winning when you have weirder forms and weirder shapes, right? And that's what's great about retopologizing. Is it does make that process reasonably easy. It's just not magic. It takes time. It takes some work, just like all the other modeling stuff does. So in this case, I figured what would be good is we could do, kind of probably finish this area up a little bit. I think we'll do a little bit here. We'll probably still have a little more work to do next week. Like I said, it does take a bit of time to retopo. Obviously, it's taking me a little longer because I'm teaching it than it would if I was just going at it, right? But yeah. All right, so now we need to start to connect these parts up. And one of the things we can start to see here is that sometimes you have denser meshes than you have on the rest of the area. But you'll also notice that we have more here than here. So it is one of those things where we might even just put ourselves in that position. And also remember, it saves what you're working on last time, right? So you see my retopo mesh is still active, but you do want to select that if you don't have it selected, right? So 4 for object mode. You can select it here or an outliner, of course. Once you actually go into edit mode, like say 2 for edges, I would just make sure that the reference object is set to the quad body, even though it is already set down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I've got a lot of geometry here that I can kind of probably slide down a little bit. Now, we could use the slide tool for it, but remember, you can actually use your sculpting tools with this. So if I hit 5 for sculpt mode, and we make sure to grab, right? There's a little sculpting tool called grab. And you notice the yellow ones, they have different coloring, right? So one of the kind of cool things is Blender's actually pretty good about having coloring schemes for different tools, right? So depending on your tool, you'll get a different kind of color. Usually the yellow ones are yellow. Occasionally they're not, right? It depends on which one it is. But grab is basically a move tool, right? And so what you could do is you could just left-click drag, and you see how you can start to kind of bring some of these down a bit, right? And of course, the brush size determines the influence of the stuff around it. But you'll notice that I could kind of pull these down, and you see how it's still keeping that shape pretty well there. And of course, it gets a little squiggly here, so if we hold down Shift, right? Remember, Shift is your smooth, right? And just to remind you, if you are on a sculpt brush, you can go to your tool properties, right? Right here. And what you could do is you'll notice that there is a strength. And you see there's like 2 paintbrushes, icons, unified strength. I usually have that off. It's actually, sometimes, I think it's off by default sometimes, I'm not sure. But I usually, when I start working with sculpting, I make sure it's off. And what that does is it allows me to have this grab have a strength of 4. But then you see my smooth tool has a strength that's lower. So by turning that off, you can actually get non-unified strength. If that's on, the strength will stay the same for all brushes, which is kind of cool, but sometimes also not cool. So it's kind of a neat feature and preference they have. Just kind of make sure to maybe turn it off if you need to. All right. So kind of cool. Just a little bit about that. And that's what Shift does. Shift automatically uses the smooth. And that's a great way to kind of spread out and make these areas even again, right? So just keep that in mind, is that it can be quite easy with just the grab tool to do these little adjustments. And of course, we can go back to, like, say, 1 for vertex. And it'll go back to your tweak tool, right? Because that's what we were last using here. And just keep that in mind, is you can actually use your sculpting tools for shaping with shrink wrap and retopo. Which is actually quite cool. And you see how it's kind of given us a bit of a better spacing, so these will line up a little bit better. So sometimes you can just make those shape adjustments, and you see how the distribution here is a little more uniform. It was kind of a little more bunched up here and less down there. So remember, 5 for sculpt mode. That will allow you to kind of use your grab tool, and then Shift can kind of smooth it out, right? Because you notice sometimes it gets a little bit irregular. So Shift is a great way to kind of smooth shapes out. So yeah, just kind of want to make sure about that a little bit. And then, of course, we can still do a little more tweaks here if we need to, right? Kind of, if we want to be a little more precise, just with our tweak tool. And we can start to connect these up, right? So I can go to 2 here. And if I want, I can just grab these 2 edges, right? Shift B, remember, is my quick key for bridge. But if you right-click, bridge edge loops, right? I can always go to Alt-C for loop cut. There we go. And then Q could take us back to our selection tool. In this case, is my tweak. And if you double left click, it selects the whole edge loop. And then you can just hold down Shift to deselect. Remember, in the tweak tool, Shift actually selects and adds to selection and deselects. So Shift is kind of your add and subtract selections for the tweak tool. Usually it's Shift for add and Control for subtract. So usually if you're using something that's not the tweak tool, Control's often going to be your deselect. But for the tweak tool, Shift is. And then, of course, I can, right-click, bridge from edge loops. And the bridge tool is good, particularly when it's just one edge of welding those, so they're all together. And now we're starting to slowly connect those up. And you can see that's what we're really doing here is just kind of adding up a little bit more stuff here. Sometimes I find that I might temporarily go and delete a polygon in one area to make it a little easier for me to get a little more geometry in other areas. Or even just kind of terminate in a slightly unique way, right? So like we might even just come in here and say, hey, I can grab these 2 edges and I can hit Control E for extrude. And in this case, if you turn auto merge on, right, and middle mouse but drag, you'll see that that vertex often will auto merge. Sometimes it doesn't. Like I said, auto merge is a little bit unpredictable. So I might just go to 1, move that down. And you see how sometimes auto merge doesn't actually work. It's weird. I've noticed that sometimes it's a bit picky. It's very useful. It works often, but not all the time. If you need to, you can always just select both, right-click, because that brings up your vertex context menu. Blender has merge vertice tools, right? With a lot of cool options. You can merge wherever you've placed your cursor at, right? That cursor guy. You can merge to the first selected. You can merge to the last selected. You can merge to center. If you have multiple and different sections, Collapse will kind of take care of them on their own. You can even do it by distance. So you actually have a really kind of versatile, excellent merge vertice system there. Like I said, oftentimes you'll be fine with the auto merge, but like I said, sometimes I just found it's a bit picky. That's why I have it off, and then sometimes turn it on when I feel like I can use it. And then if it's still not working, I'm like, you know what? I know I've got other merge options. We said we're kind of slowly kind of connecting these up, and then I could bridge those 2, right? Right-click, bridge edge loops. And slowly you're seeing we're kind of filling this in and getting ourselves to that point we need to be. I feel like this should go up here, so Alt-C for loop cut. There we go. And then we can grab this edge and this edge. I'm going to use Shift-B, which is my quick key for bridge, but I'm just bridging. Remember, it's just right-click. There we go. And now you can see we're getting closer and closer to kind of having this all filled in. We're probably not going to add a bunch of edge loops just to get these all merged in there. Like I might even find myself saying, hey, I'm going to grab these 2 edge loops, these 2 edges, right, with that one not selected. And I could bridge those, right? So sometimes you're just going to terminate at something like that because you don't want to have a million polygons in here everywhere, right? You're still trying to be pretty efficient while having good edge flow. Now, for this one, I really feel like I'm probably going to need an extra loop or 2 through here. So one of the things I will sometimes do is I'll come in here and I'm going to say, hey, I probably want an edge loop through here. So I'm going to follow this loop to kind of maybe more towards where the horn's at. And I'm just going to select the face, hit delete, delete faces. And I probably could use one right here as well. So if I wanted to, I could even delete the one next to it, right? Now it's going to leave a gap here, but I can always come back and rework that a little bit later on or spin. So sometimes I'll take a loop or a face or 2 out just because I know I need that loop going through here, and I'll figure that out later on. Guys, this is going to be the tricky part about retopologizing. Whereas with box modeling, I can tell you extrude exactly this polygon at this stage. And that's one of the reasons why it's a great way to kind of learn core character creature modeling and why it's great at doing a lot of it. There are parts where you're doing retopologizing where it's kind of like, hey, here's your tools. Make the edge loops follow the contour of the surface. Pretty much try to keep it quads. But have fun, right? There's kind of a point where it's like, it is a bit of problem solving. It is a bit of puzzle piece stuff. So I'm going to go to Alt-C for loop cut. I'm going to put a loop cut through there and there. And remember, this tool is pretty great at following the surface. If need be, right, we can always hit Q and double click on an edge loop, right, double left click. Remember, right click has an edge slide, and we can just slide that up a little bit. And if we want to, I can grab this edge loop and edge slide. And the nice thing is you'll see that because I did that kind of little deleting of polygons, this whole localized area, I can slide along without sliding everything, right? It's kind of, by deleting those polygons, I've kind of allowed this to be a localized effect. And now we have more here. Of course, I can hit 5 to go in here and do a little bit of smoothing, right? A little bit of shaping. If need be, we can always go in here and just tweak a few vertices or edges, right? So remember, I'm just going back and forth. If you get that weird thing, right, sometimes shrink wrap does that. That's when I turn on the snap, right? So sometimes snap is great. Particularly when you're tweaking stuff, snap can be quite useful. Although usually shrink wrap works great, so that's why I said I selectively turn it on when I need it, like when shrink wrap's being a little weird, which most of the time it's not. But shrink wrap is much better about having your edge loops follow the surface than snap is. So I tend to find with snap on, adding loops goes weird, right? So I kind of leave that as something I selectively turn on when I need it. The nice thing is if you've been using Speed Retopo, it does set the face up, and that works pretty well. And now you can see we can start to go in here with those extra loops, and I can easily grab that edge, shift left click that edge. I use my quick key, which is X for shortest path. Then I can go to this side, and we're selecting, left click to select, of course, and then shift left click to add a selection. Remember, in the select menu, there is select linked shortest path. I just have a quick key for it. And then, of course, we can bridge. Right mouse button, bridge edge loops. I have a quick key set up for it, of course. And you see we're slowly starting to piece this all together. But you do see this does take a little bit of work. It does take a little bit of critical thinking, problem solving, right? You just kind of have to know what you want your mesh to look like, the flows. Know that you can have some of these diamond-shaped quads as kind of termination points, particularly if they're kind of not interfering with the flow. So slowly we're kind of getting this together. And one of the things you'll notice is we've talked about 5 stars. You don't want them everywhere. If your model is made of 5 stars, you're doing something wrong. But you notice how you have 5 stars in certain points, right? When you have complicated edge loop flows meeting with other complicated edge loop flows that are doing different directions, you're going to have a 5 star, right? Anytime there's been some branch modeling, you're going to have some 5 stars. 5 stars are absolutely acceptable and natural on many parts of a model. Remember, these aren't n-gons, though, right? A star is a vertex with a certain amount of edges coming out of it. The bigger the star, the more unpredictable for shaping it can become. The more, when you do deformation, it'll do weird, unpredictable things. So it is kind of like an n-gon in that sense, that the bigger it is, the more weird it could be. And that's not necessarily something you want, particularly on a character creature with a lot of curvature. You want the shape to be fairly predictable, but also it's going to move and change shape. But 5 stars are kind of right in that realm of they're fine. They work pretty predictably. They work pretty well with shape. Once you start to get a bigger than a 5 star, that's where it starts to get a little sketchy. 6 stars, if it's kind of in between a finger and toe, is usually not a problem. The shape works pretty well for those. It animates pretty well. But once you get bigger than a 5 star, you have to start to be careful, right? Doesn't mean you can never have a 6 star, but you want to be very super selective about that and not have a lot of those. But naturally having some 5 stars in an area, really not an issue. There's no way. If somebody tells you can model without stars, they're full of it, right? All you have to do is point to wireframes from all the big movies, video games, from professionals that are the best in the business, and you'll see plenty of 5 stars on them, right? It's one of those things that you're going to have, not plenty, but you'll definitely have some, right? But even then, you don't want your model made of 5 stars, right? Really, you should only have them where they're necessary. All right. So that's a bit of a divergent topic, but remember, it's not just about Blender. It's about technique, right? It's about understanding what you want your geometry to look like and stuff like that. All right, so I really think we're probably not even going to get to those other guys here. We're just going to try to fix this up. But you see that this is the part where it does get a little bit tricky. It's one of the reasons why we saved this largely for our last most complicated model once we've had a year with Blender, to do this, because it is a bit tricky. And I didn't really get to do it with you guys last year because we went to distance learning really quick. And so it's kind of like, I'm not going to torture you guys with that. But this year, I normally would do it this project, whether it's a biped troll or a quadruped. Now this guy, once again, see how there's a lot of distance between those? I'm thinking, hey, I could double left click on this guy. Remember, right click brings up your tools, right? In this case, it's the edge context menu. So tools that you don't use as much, I actually use slide a decent amount, so I actually have that set to a quickie. Remember, if you want to assign it to a quickie, though, right click, assign shortcut. I actually have it set to S at home. There we go. I now have edge slide. Boom. Because quickies are cool, right? And so I could slide this to be a little more over here, right? Maybe one for vertex, so I can go back to my tweak tool. And then Alt-C, right? Remember, Alt-C is your quickie for loop cut. Put an edge loop in there. And remember, that shrink wrap lets it stick to the surface. See how it actually follows the contour of the surface that's there. And now, once again, you see how we have more? So I can go to 2 for edge mode, and I can grab maybe these 2 edges. I'm going to turn auto merge on to see if it'll work this time. Control E, middle mouse button to move it out. And you see how it actually worked great? So auto merge is a bit 50-50, right? If I'm doing something like this where I know I want it, I'll turn it on and I'll see if it works, basically. If it doesn't, I know it's pretty easy to maybe manually do it or just, right-click merge vertices. But just kind of figured it'd be cool to get you guys to see that a little bit. That it can be cool. It can do some neat stuff. And once again, I'm thinking, hey, maybe I could use an extra edge loop through here, right? So once again, if we need to, we could always kind of distribute these a little more. Maybe 5 for sculpt. Kind of push some of these over and back a little bit just to get a bit more of an even distribution through here. And remember, as you zoom in, your brush will become smaller relative to the mesh. And of course, right and left bracket keys are your brush sizes, or some quickies for it. I feel like S is the normal quickie for brush size, but I like the brackets. So I tend to use those. And of course, we can hold down Shift to smooth it out a little bit in areas. But once again, this could be a great, much quicker way than sliding these all manually, right? Sometimes slide edge is great. But sometimes you really just kind of want to quickly, with a brush-based way, do it, right? And then Shift to smooth it a little bit. But this is cool. This is actually one of those things you don't get a good workflow for this in Maya. In fact, the only other package I've ever used that had a nice workflow for this was Modo. Modo had some built-in kind of sculpting, shaping, soft selection tools that worked quite well for its retopo tools. Here they're just letting you use your sculpting tools, but it's so easy to go to sculpt mode just by hitting 5, right? Then of course I can hit 2 for edge mode, double left click. In this case, S, because I set that as my quickie for slide, so I could slide that guy over a little bit. Remember, that is right click, edge context menu. Move that vertex over a little bit to tweak. And then, of course, Alt-C for a nice loop cut there. And there we go. And now we can just kind of finish this stuff off a little bit here. So I think we'll go to 2 for edge mode. I'll grab those 2 and those 2. Remember, left click to select, Shift will add. I'm going to right click for bridge, but I do have a quickie set up for that. And then, of course, Alt-C for loop cut to put that in there. And if I want to, I can just go back to Q, maybe turn on auto merge to see if I can get those guys to auto merge. There we go. They did. And now we're just left with this last little bit, but you'll notice how this would actually work to create a quad, right? That's really just 4 vertices. So 2 for edge, double click, double left click to select that edge loop. Right click, and remember, right below bridge edge loops is new face from edges. That's how you fill. And there we go. We got some of that flow. Now, in this case, I might want to spin this a little bit, see if I can get a slightly different configuration. So I'll go to 2 for edge, select an edge. Right click, because there is rotate edge. That's your spin edge, right? Rotate edge clockwise. And we can rotate that. And I'm not sure if that's going to really give us a better result. Let me see, though. Let me adjust these a little bit. Maybe hit 5 to smooth it out a little bit. No, that really did not. I think the flow we had before was the better option. But of course, we can hit 5, and we can do a little bit of smoothing out and a little bit of shape adjustment if we want to. There we go. And that kind of gives us something pretty reasonable for that. It might be one of those things where maybe you will kind of play with and adjust that a little bit more, or maybe you'll find an edge loop that you can put through somewhere else. But sometimes you end up terminating like that. I feel like that's okay. Maybe we'll see if we can. Maybe that one will work a little better. Let me see here. Actually, yeah, I think spinning it and then adjusting the shape a little bit kind of gives it a bit of a more natural termination flow in there. But remember, edge mode, there is a rotate edge clockwise, which is your spin edge tool. And it takes an existing edge and it spins it around to give it a different configuration. You see how just that kind of more naturally kind of terminates that flow through there. All right. So just kind of a little of that problem solving. But even then, sometimes the spin edge can be kind of a way to get you a slightly better flow for these edges and surfaces. Keep in mind that this area is also not going to do too much animation. If we go to 4, you'll see that the edge flow works pretty well. It's going to shade pretty well. So that'll get us something pretty good for that area. All right. I think that'll be a great place to stop as we come back and then fix some other stuff in the preceding lectures. All right, so I'm going to stop recording.